Human beings and so-called rationality. I've said before, and I've argued slightly before, that human beings are not inherently rational. I've had some people disagree with me on that, but I think that in light of certain events, I think my point's been proven. I remember back when I was having a discourse with Kelly Jones, whom I kind of considered somewhat unfinished, and that's my own fault because I got distracted with other things before I fully explained my own points. But during that discourse, we were talking about so-called enlightened masochism or something like that. And basically she was arguing that the male point of view is one that women should try to be like because men tend to be a little bit more rational or a bit more logical and tend to see the world better. And my argument was that as long as you're human, you're flawed in your perspective on life, and thus to say that the male perspective is better than the female's is kind of erroneous and a bit foolhardy, because you're taking one faulty point of view and trying to say it's better than another faulty point of view, which in itself is irrational and illogical. And I was also arguing from the premise that human beings are not inherently rational to begin with. We're more passionate, we're more emotional than rational. And I've had a couple of people argue against me on that, basically saying that, nah, human beings are rational, tried to come up with different examples of that. And I try to say that, look, we are capable of rationality, but it's not something that we are naturally geared toward. We developed logic and rational thinking in order to circumvent our normal responses to things, which tend to be more on the emotional side of things. Now, there's been a couple of experiments that I would have liked to have listed to kind of prove this that were recently done. One of them, which was very, very interesting, was done by marketeers. And as they, the science of marketing tends to work with how human minds work, it's not surprising to me that they were the ones who figured this out. But I think I got something much, much better. Much better. And what that is that recent blow up in the so-called atheist community on YouTube. I don't think I could have waited for a better example of just how irrational and illogical human beings can get when you put them against the wall and you put them in so-called stressful situations. It's also perfect because this is with a group of people who consider themselves to be more rational than everyone else. But when push comes to shove, they acted just like everyone else, which I think proves my point. I mean, let's look at this. Here we have a group of people who claim to be all about scientific thinking and all about, reasoning things out and all about rationality over superstitions and being able to logically think through things. We've got a group of people who claim to champion all of that and be about all that and do that every day. And yet we catch them doing things like trying to censor people's videos and sending them death threats and saying all sorts of really effed up things in people's comment sections, simply because they were offended that that person said something against their favorite guy. I have to admit being highly amused by that. Partially because, I'll admit part of me is a bit of a deviant, but another reason is simply because it proves my point so well. That human beings are not inherently rational. It is not rational to decide that somebody instantly must be defamed simply because they spoke out against your favorite person. If people were rational and were mostly dealing with logical thinking, then they would understand that it is illogical to throw all your weight behind one individual. I think I've stated this before in an earlier video, really, really old video, about how dangerous it is to follow just one human being or to throw your weight behind one human being as if that person was completely infallible. This is not true. We're all human beings, and all human beings are capable of completely fucking up. We make mistakes. We are not perfect. This is something that's said over and over again, and it amazes me how much we forget this when it comes to our favorite person to follow. When you hang on someone's every word, when you think that somebody's always right, if you think this person is like the ultimate example of whatever ism you happen to throw your weight behind, then you're not really seeing that they have their own faults and that they can fuck up every now and then. We're not always going to get it right because no human being always gets it right. We make mistakes, and it's because we are flawed beings. Sooner or later, we're going to slip up or make a mistake on something, which is why it's very important to make sure that there are people around you who can help you to see your mistakes so that you can correct them. But if all you have are a bunch of sycophants who think that you're the greatest thing since sliced bread, a phrase that I never really understood, you're not going to notice your own mistakes, and then sooner or later you might get caught up in your own bullshit. And I think we're seeing some of that here now. Worse, anybody who will call them out on their mistakes will be vilified, simply because, oh, how dare they say that about so-and-so. It's not even about whether that person was right in criticizing them. It's just the fact that they criticized them to begin with. And that in itself is irrational and illogical. And it once again shows that this is the way human beings tend to react. When their favorite thing is maligned, when their favorite person has somebody out there detracting from them. What makes this even more interesting is that we now have people doing the sorts of things that they condemned another group of people for doing. It's interesting how you got people who condemned the religious people on YouTube for, having death threats and censoring people's videos and, leaving all types of nasty things in comment sections. Say, oh yeah, this is what the Christians do. This is what the Muslims do. This is what the religious fanatics do. We don't do that. But just have one person in your camp say something against your favorite person, and suddenly you're doing the exact same things simply because they said this about my favorite person. And that's irrationality right there. You're not thinking logically when you do these things. You're reacting emotionally, which is what human beings do. Because human beings are not inherently rational. It's very rare to find them. So, I guess chalk this up from learning from experience. There's always something to learn from just about any event. And I'm really hoping that this event gets people to realize that, maybe we're not nearly as enlightened as we'd like to pretend we are. Because we ain't. If you got human DNA, you're fucked. It helps to remember that. It keeps you from, falling into these sorts of pitfalls. And it may also keep you from doing stupid things like, what we've been seeing. I'll admit that I haven't really noticed because I haven't been around here lately to get caught up in all the drama. I'm just now hearing about some of this stupid shit, but I can't say I'm surprised. I'm not. I could say that I'm a little disappointed, but I'm not completely, because for me to be disappointed would mean that I would expect a certain group of people to act better or act in a certain way that I felt that they, did not live up to. But for me to have believed that, I would have to have believed that human beings were able to rise above this sort of thing, and I'm not too sure if they can. Whether you're an atheist or not. For what it's worth, even though I don't know all the details and I didn't get caught up in this, I will say one thing. For all the heat that Richard Coughlan has gotten for those last two couple of videos he made, if you look at what he said rationally, the dude is right. You may not like what he said about your favorite person, but when it comes to his criticisms of what people in the so-called atheist community have done, he's absolutely right. And it's only your own stubbornness that would make you think otherwise. It's only your own, emotional outbursts and you being caught up in your passions that you would think that he's wrong. somebody rationally looking at it would be able to go, yeah, he's got a point. If you're detached from the moment. To be detached would mean you're not caught up emotionally in it, which means you can look at it critically and look at it rationally. But the people who have been acting up in arms definitely aren't looking at it in that way, and that's why they're all up in arms. And it's just funny, that's the very people who claim to be rational. And I don't really think that I could explain my point any better than that. Human beings are not inherently rational. And I think this event should prove it to people. And I hope that people learn from it.